Hi Year 11s, so this is our second video in the energy and matter recycling topic of ecosystems. As said in the last video, this is unit 4.5 in your textbook. We're going to be looking at just the water cycle in this video, which is something that you've probably done multiple times throughout the geography and science from year 7 to 10, but regardless, we need to look at it again in year 11 biology and just look at how water is recycled through an ecosystem. The way that all of these cycle videos are going to work is we're going to have a slide describing how the cycle works. We're going to have a slide showing how that cycle works, and we're also going to have a slide talking about how humans have impacted on that cycle. So let's start with the water cycle. So we know that water is taken up by plants through soil. It's absorbed by their roots, and they have extensive root hairs to help with that, which we learnt about in our last topic. And then that water is transported to the leaves through the xylem and phloem. Water is also ingested by animals. They obtain that from surface soil, so that from ponds, or in humans by taps. Water can evaporate from oceans, rivers, lakes, and animals, and it will form into water vapor from that process. And you might be asking, how can water evaporate from animals? For example, for humans, from sweat. Transpiration, that's when water is evaporated from leaves of terrestrial plants. Condensation is when water vapor cools and forms liquid. Precipitation is when water falls from the clouds as rain, hail, or snow. Runoff is when water flows into oceans as rivers, streams, or creeks. And leaching is when that water returns to oceans from soil. So if we look at a diagram of the water cycle and how it's constantly moved around. So let's say we start in the groundwater here, or the water here. We're going to have that water moving through the soil, animals coming to drink that water, and eventually from those plants, from the animals, the water will start to evaporate. In plants, that's called transpiration. Animals, from ocean, lakes, and streams, that's just evaporation. At that point, your water is moving into basically the air. Eventually, it will be condensated, where it's going to be turned back into liquid form. And then eventually, when it gets too heavy, that will start to rain back down onto the whole land area, as it would be. That water will return to lakes and groundwaters and oceans, so the whole cycle will start again. So water is never really lost in an ecosystem. It is only ever recycled. Now that is until humans start to impact the ecosystem. So humans interfere with the water cycle. We remove large quantities of fresh water from rivers for irrigation for our plants and crops. We release pollutants such as fertilizers, which go into those waterways and start to modify the water, making it not able to be drunk by animals. We remove trees, making way for urban developments, etc., therefore removing any source of transpiration, and that water being released into the atmosphere. And lastly, we've been increasing global warming, which is going to increase temperatures, which is going to increase evaporation, which in long-term effects changes rainfall patterns. Don't think that global warming is just about increased temperature. It's also about increased rain because of the increased evaporation, which leads to increased condensation, which leads to increased precipitation.